Hey, fourth graders, Mr. Tracy here. Going to read the Cay Chapters 9 and 10 to you. I really want to talk about Chapter 9. I hope we get a chance to do that in class, but if not, I'm going to kind of share some things here through this video. That's why I decided to have me over here. I guess I'll wave with this hand in the corner, just so we can kind of talk a little bit. You can see my face and kind of think about some of these ideas in chapter 9 that I think the author really wants us to kind of take some time on as we're reading this chapter. And what I'm talking about specifically is that relationship between Timothy and Philip and how it changes over the book. At the end of chapter 9, in chapter 10, Philip's going to kind of talk about how he starts to view Timothy a little bit differently. So at the end of chapter 9, I'm going to kind of talk a little bit about that chapter. So thanks for following along. Thanks for doing your best. I'm glad you're enjoying this book, and I think you're going to enjoy it even more as you get farther in. So here we go. The Cay chapter 9. Let's start there. The questions that you're going to have to kind of answer in your packet are pretty simple for chapter 9. Explain what the rope is used for. So we're going to find out about a rope in this chapter, and then we're going to find out what that young boss means at the end, so you can kind of fill that in. You're also going to draw a new cover for the book when you're done with chapter 9. But here we go. Let's go ahead and read chapter 9. In the afternoon, Timothy said we'd make a rope. On the north end of the island, tough vines, almost as large as a pencil, were laced over the sand. It took us several hours to tear out a big pile of them. Then Timothy began weaving a rope that would stretch all the way down the hill to the beach and a fire pile. The rope was for me. If he happened to be out at the reef, and I heard a plane, I could take a light from the campfire, follow the rope down, and touch off the big fire. The vine rope would also serve to get me safely down to the beach. After we'd torn the vines out, and he was weaving the rope, he said, "Young boss, you must begin to help with the other work." We were sitting up by the hut. I had my back to a palm and was thinking that back in Willemstad, at this moment, I'd probably be sitting in a classroom, 3 desks away from Henrik, listening to Herr Jacquier talk about European history. I'd been tutored in Dutch, the first year in Willemstad, so I could attend the regular school. Now I could speak it and understand it. My hands were tired from pulling the vines, and I just wanted to sit and think. I didn't want to work. I said, "Timothy, I'm blind. I can't see to work." I heard him cutting something with his sharp knife. He replied, "Dan is not blind." Oh, sorry. De hand, that must mean like his hand. De hand is not blind. Didn't the old man understand? To work, aside from pulling up vines or drawing something in the sand, you must be able to see. Stubbornly, he said, "Young boss, we need sleeping mats. You can make de mats." I looked over in his directions. "You do it," I said. He sighed back, saying, "De best mat maker in Charlotte, Amelie, down in Frenchtown, be totally blind." "But he's a man, and he has to do that kind of work to make a living." "Be true," said Timothy. But in a few minutes he placed several links of palm fiber across my lap. He really was a black mule. "De palm mat is very easy, just over and under." Becoming angry with him, I said, "I tell you, I can't see." He paid no attention to me. "Take this hand, hold the palm like this, then over and under, like the man in Frenchtown, then more palm." I could see him, or I could feel him standing there watching me as I tried to weave the links, but I knew they weren't fitting together. He said, "Like this, I tell you," and he reached down to guide my hand, over and under. I tried again, but it didn't work. I stood up, I threw the palm fibers at him and screamed, "You ugly black man, I won't do it. You're stupid, you can't even spell." Timothy's heavy hand struck my face sharply. Stunned, I touched my face where he'd hit me. Then I turned away from where I thought he was. My cheek stung, but I wouldn't let him see me with tears in my eyes. So that's a part there where we have 2 things that are kind of bothersome to me as a reader. One, we have Timothy striking Philip, slapping him and hitting him, which, was not a good thing, not the right thing to do. But before that, Philip is angry. He's angry he can't see. He's angry he can't help out. And, Timothy's trying to get him to help, to do something, to be productive. And he's struggling with it because he's used to being able to see. And Philip kind of gives up, and instead of being upset at himself or frustrated that he can't see right now, he kind of yells at Timothy, and he calls him, I'm looking back to see, you ugly black man, I won't do it. You're stupid. You can't even spell. Those words are really hurtful. I think he's thinking a little bit about the way his mom talked about African American people. He calls them ugly, and he calls them stupid, and really puts Timothy down by saying, you can't even spell, you can't even read. And that's got to be incredibly hurtful too. But doesn't make it okay for Timothy to hit Philip. But we see their relationship kind of break down here. And let's going to go ahead and continue reading at the bottom of the page and see how this chapter finishes out. So it's down here. I heard him saying very gently, be getting back to work, my own self. I sat down again. He began to sing the fungi and the fish song in a low voice, and I could picture him sitting on the sand in front of the hut, that tangled gray hair, that ugly black face with thick lips, those great horny hands winding the strands of vine. The rope, I thought, it wasn't for him. It was for me. After a while, I said, Timothy? He didn't answer, but he walked over to me, pressing more palm fronds into my hands. He murmured, 'tis very easy, over and under. Then he went back to singing about fungi and fish. Something happened to me that day on the Cay. I'm not quite sure what it was even now, but I'd begun to change. I said to Timothy, I want to be your friend. He said softly, young boss, you've always been my friend. I said, can you call me Philip instead of young boss? Philip, he said warmly. So there we get, this whole time Timothy's been calling him young boss because of that relationship of African Americans and whites in this time in history. We know that Philip earlier on said he wasn't sure if he should call him a mister because he doesn't always see, or his parents don't always see, African Americans on the same sort of level ground as his family. And Timothy, I think, is the same way. He sees maybe Philip and he's calling him young boss, kind of almost like Philip's the one who's been in charge, calling him boss. But we start to see this change in this relationship, and Philip saying that, he began to change, and he approaches Timothy. Instead of saying sorry, he says, I want to be your friend. And that is a turning point. So you can pause the video here. You can answer the questions for 9, and then you can draw your picture if you want, and then you can continue the video for chapter 10. But I'm going to go ahead and read chapter 10. Also going to go ahead and kind of cancel out my picture here. That way I can just focus on reading and not worrying about how I look down in the corner. So here we go, chapter 10. During our 7th night on the island, it rained. It was one of those tropical storms that comes up swiftly without warning. We were asleep on the palm mats that I'd made, but it awakened us immediately. The rain sounded like bullets hitting on the dried palm frond roof. We ran into it, shouting and letting the fresh water hit our bodies. It was cool and it felt good. Timothy yelled that his catchment was working. He had taken more boards from the top of the raft, and he had made a large trough that would catch the rain. He picked up bamboo links of the beach and had fitted them together into a short pipe to funnel the rainwater into our 10-gallon keg. It rained for almost 2 hours, and Timothy was quite angry with himself for not making a second catchment because the keg was soon filling and overflowing. We stayed out in the cool rain for 20 or 30 minutes and then went back inside. The roof leaked back badly, but we didn't mind. We got on our mats and opened our mouths to the sweet, fresh water. Stew Cat was huddled in a miserable ball over in the corner. Timothy said, not enjoying it at all, I liked the rain because it was something I could hear and feel, not something I must see. It peppered in bursts against the frond roof, and I could hear the drips as it leaked through. The squall wind was in the tops of the palms, and I could imagine how they looked in the night sky, thrashing against each other high over our little Cay. I wanted to rain all night. We talked for a long time when the rain began to slack off. Timothy asked me about my mother and father, and I told him about them and about how we lived in Charlotte, getting very lonesome and homesick while I was telling him. He kept saying, "Ah, that be true." Then Timothy told me what he could remember from his own childhood. It wasn't at all like mine. He'd never gone to school and was working on a fishing boat by the time he was 10. It almost seemed like the only fun he had was once a year at carnival, when he'd put frangipani leaves around his ankles and dress up in a donkey hide to parade around with maki jumbas, the spirit chasers, while the old ladies of Charlotte Amalie danced the bambola around them. He chuckled. "I'd drink plenty rum these days, those 3 days of carnival." I could picture him in his donkey skins, wheeling around to the music of the steel bands. They had them in Willemstad, too. Because it had been on my mind, I told him that my mother didn't like black people, and I asked him why. He answered slowly, "I don't like some white people my own self, but 'twould be outrageous if I didn't like any of them." So here's that part there I kind of referenced in chapter 9 about Philip and Timothy and the different relationship between whites and African Americans. And remember, Philip's a boy, and he's trying to figure it out, and he probably never really thought about it because it was his mom. But now he's asking Timothy, why is it? And I like Timothy's answer too, that there are some people that he doesn't like, but it's crazy to put all people in one category and judge kind of a group of people by the color of skin. And I really think the author wants us to think about that. That's why the author has brought this up several times in the book. I'm going to continue reading. Wanting to hear it from Timothy, I asked him why there were different colors of skin, white, black, brown, and red, and he laughed back. "Why be fish different color, or flower different color? I true don't know, Philip, but I true think beneath skin it's all the same." So he's saying, fish and flowers and everything's are different colors. So why would people have to be all the same color? And he says, underneath we're all the same. Herr Jacquier had said something like that in school, but it didn't quite mean as much but it didn't mean quite as much as when Timothy said it. Long after he began to snore in the dripping hut, I thought about it. Suddenly I wished my father and mother could see us together on the little island. I moved close to Timothy's big body before I went to sleep. I remembered smiling in the darkness. He felt neither white nor black. In the morning, the air was crisp, and the Cay smelled fresh and clean. Timothy cooked a small fish, a pompano, that he'd speared at dawn down on the reef. Neither of us had felt so good or so clean since we'd been aboard the Hato, or the Hato. And without discussing it, we both thought this might be the day an aircraft would swing up into the Devil's Mouth, if that's where we were. The pompano, broiled over the low fire, tasted good. Of course, we were eating little, but what came from the sea: fish, lagosta, mussels, and the eggs from sea urchins, those small black round sea animals with sharp spines that attached themselves to the reefs. Timothy had tried to make a stew from seaweed, but it tasted bitter. Then he tried to boil some new sea grape roots, but that made us ill. The only thing that ever worked for him was sea grape leaves, broiled first in seawater and then cooked in fresh water. But above us, 40 feet from the ground, Timothy said, was a feast. Big, fat, green coconuts. When we'd landed, there were a few dried ones on the ground, but the meat in them was not very tasty. In a fresher one, there was still some milk, but it was rancid. At least once a day, especially when we were around the hut, Timothy would say, "'Tis outrageous dem coconuts hang in de sky when we could use de milk and meat." And he'd say, "Timothy, my own self, long ago could climb de palm very easy," or hinting and I guessed, looking up at them, "Philip, I do believe you be getting outrageously strong on this dear island." He made a point of saying that if he were only 15 again, he could climb the tree and slice them off with his knife. But at 70 odd, he did not think he could make it to the top. That morning over breakfast, Timothy said, looking to the tops of the palms, "I'm sure a little milk from the coconut would be good now, eh, Philip?" As yet, I didn't have the courage to climb the palms. "Yes, it would," I said. Timothy cleared his throat, sighed deeply, and put the coconuts out of his mind. But I knew he'd try me again. He said, "Dem devlin coconuts, aside your mother, would never be knowin' you now." I asked why. "You are very brown and very lean," he said. I tried to imagine how I looked. I knew my shirt and pants were in tatters. My hair felt ropey. There was no way to comb it. I wondered how my eyes looked, and I asked Timothy about that. "They look without cease," he said. "They stare, Philip." "Do they bother you?" Timothy laughed. "Not me. Every day I think what rare good luck I have that you ere be with my own self on this outrageous humbug island." I thought a while, and then I asked him, "How long was it before that friend of yours, that friend in the Barbados, could see again?" Timothy replied vaguely, "Oh, many month, I do recall. But you told me on the raft it was only 3 days." "Did I say that?" "Yes." "Well," Timothy said, "'twas a long time ago, but he got his sight back, to be true." He paused a moment and then said, "Now I tell you, we got work to do today." I noticed more and more that Timothy always changed the subject when we began to talk about my eyes. He would make any kind of excuse. "What work?" I asked. "Now, let me see," he said. "For one thing, we must make another catchment, and we must go down to the reef for food, and—" I waited. Timothy finally exploded. "Now that is a lot of work, Philip, to be true." So that's the end of chapter 10. Really good chapters, 9 and 10. I'm excited to talk to you about it. I'm excited to read over your packets. I'm wondering what's going on with Philip's eyesight. Is he going to get his sight back? Timothy seems like he doesn't want to talk about it. We're going to have to wait and see later on in the book.